I stared at my phone screen in the back of the Army transport vehicle, my hands trembling as I read the text message for the third time. After 18 months deployed in Afghanistan, I was finally coming home for Christmas. The message from my father was only 10 words long, but each one hit like a physical blow. Christmas is better without you. Don't come. The desert heat felt cold compared to the ice spreading through my chest. Around me, other soldiers chatted excitedly about their homecoming plans, but their voices faded into background noise. I typed back one word: understood. Then I opened my military laptop and accessed my personnel files. My fingers moved across the keyboard with the same precision I used to disarm explosives. Within 10 minutes, I made a single change to my beneficiary paperwork. I had no idea this decision would change everything. The transport rumbled toward the airfield as memories crashed over me like waves. Growing up, I had always been the responsible daughter, the one who cleaned up messes and fixed problems while others created chaos. My father, Robert, had struggled with gambling addiction since my mother died when I was 10 years old. When he married Linda 3 years later, I thought our family might finally heal. Instead, Linda brought a different kind of poison into our home. She was 42 when she married my father, a real estate agent with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. Linda treated me like an inconvenience from day one, constantly reminding me that I was Robert's baggage from his previous life. When she gave birth to my half-brother Danny, any pretense of motherly affection toward me evaporated completely. I enlisted in the Army at 18, partly to serve my country but mostly to escape the suffocating atmosphere Linda created. For the past 5 years, I had been sending home half my military pay to support them. When my father's gambling debts threatened foreclosure, I covered the mortgage payments. When Danny broke his leg playing football and insurance wouldn't cover everything, I paid the medical bills. When Linda wanted to renovate the kitchen, I funded that too. Despite my sacrifices, my father always treated my deployments like personal attacks against him. "Why do you have to be gone so long?" he would complain during our video calls. "Linda needs help with Danny, and we have expenses." Never once did he ask how I was doing or if I felt safe. The text message confirmed what I had suspected for years. They saw me as a walking ATM, not a daughter. Linda had been systematically poisoning my father against me, painting me as selfish and ungrateful, while positioning herself and Danny as the real family deserving of attention and resources. But the real shock came when I scrolled through social media during the layover in Germany. Friends from high school had posted Christmas party photos, and I noticed several comments that made my blood run cold. "Glad Carly isn't coming home," one read. "Linda says she's too dangerous to be around after what she's been through overseas." Another comment mentioned how brave Linda was for protecting Danny from his unstable sister. My hands shook as I discovered post after post spreading lies about my mental health. Linda had been telling everyone I was suffering from severe PTSD and violent tendencies. She claimed I had threatened the family and couldn't be trusted around normal people. The narrative was elaborate and convincing, the damaged veteran who couldn't readjust to civilian life. The final insult came in a photo album Linda had posted just 3 days earlier. My childhood bedroom, the one I had carefully maintained with my mother's belongings and memories, had been completely transformed into Linda's craft room. My mother's antique dresser was gone, replaced by a cutting table covered in fabric. The walls, once painted the soft yellow my mother and I had chosen together, were now a harsh white decorated with Linda's motivational quotes about new beginnings and letting go of the past. I realized then that Linda hadn't just been planning my emotional exile. She had been executing a calculated campaign to erase me from the family entirely, all while ensuring she could continue accessing my financial support. The Christmas text wasn't spontaneous cruelty. It was the final step in a years-long plan. As I boarded my flight to the States, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and disappointment were still there, but they were being overshadowed by a cold, military precision. Linda wanted me gone? Fine. But she was about to learn that pushing a trained soldier too far came with consequences she couldn't imagine. During the 14-hour flight from Germany to Atlanta, I had plenty of time to think about the change I had made to my military files. The other soldiers around me slept or watched movies, but I stared out the window at the Atlantic Ocean below and contemplated the financial earthquake I had just triggered. When my mother died, I inherited her entire estate through a trust fund she had established. At the time, it was worth $150,000. Over the past 15 years, careful investments and compound interest had grown it to just over $400,000. I had never touched a penny of it, viewing it as an emergency fund and a legacy to honor my mother's memory. Additionally, my military life insurance policy was substantial, $250,000, with my father and Danny listed as the primary beneficiaries. I had set it up that way when I enlisted, believing that if something happened to me overseas, at least my family would be financially secure. What my father and Linda didn't know was that I had been monitoring the trust fund closely. For the past 3 years, I had noticed irregular withdrawals and transfers that I hadn't authorized. When I investigated further during my last leave, I discovered that my father had been forging my signature on withdrawal forms, using Linda's real estate connections to create believable documentation. They had been treating my inheritance like their personal savings account, borrowing against it for everything from vacation trips to gambling debts. The quiet change I made on the plane was comprehensive. I removed both my father and Danny as beneficiaries from my life insurance policy, replacing them with the Veterans Support Foundation and a scholarship fund for children of deployed military personnel. More importantly, I transferred the trust fund to a new account that required dual authorization from both me and a military financial advisor, effectively freezing any unauthorized access. But I went one step further. I contacted the bank's fraud investigation department and provided documentation of the forged signatures and unauthorized withdrawals. I also changed the address on all my financial accounts from my father's house to my military mailing address. From now on, any correspondence about my finances would come directly to me. As my plane touched down in Atlanta, I had no idea that my father was about to discover these changes in the most humiliating way possible. The next morning, December 23rd, my father walked into First National Bank with Linda by his side. Christmas was 2 days away, and they needed cash for last-minute shopping and to pay off some pressing gambling debts. He had been borrowing against my trust fund for months, always managing to access money when he needed it most. The bank teller, a polite woman named Margaret who had worked with my family for years, pulled up the account information and frowned at her computer screen. She excused herself and returned with the branch manager, a serious man in his 50s who asked my father to step into his office. "Mr. Peterson," the manager said, gesturing to chairs across from his desk. "I'm afraid there's been a significant change to the trust fund account. As of yesterday, the account has been frozen pending a fraud investigation." Linda's face went pale. "What kind of fraud investigation?" she demanded. The manager consulted his notes carefully. "We've received documentation suggesting that unauthorized withdrawals have been made using forged signatures. The account holder has initiated a full audit of all transactions from the past 3 years. Additionally, the beneficiary designations have been changed, and all future access will require dual authorization." My father's voice cracked as he spoke. "But I need to access that money today. We have debts, obligations. Carly wouldn't do this to us." "I'm sorry, sir, but the account is completely frozen. Furthermore, we'll need you to remain available for questioning as part of the investigation. Using forged documents to access trust fund money is a federal crime." Linda grabbed my father's arm, her manicured nails digging into his sleeve. "This is impossible. Carly is overseas. She can't manage her finances from Afghanistan." The manager's expression remained neutral but firm. The changes were made through proper military channels with full legal authorization. The account holder also provided evidence of suspected fraud dating back to 2021. "I'm afraid this matter is now out of our hands." As they left the bank in shock, my father's phone began ringing. The first call was from Tony Marcelli, a loan shark who had been expecting his monthly payment. The second was from the mortgage company, wondering why their automatic withdrawal had been declined. By the end of the day, my father had received calls from 7 different creditors, all demanding payments he could no longer make. That evening, Linda sat in what used to be my bedroom, surrounded by her craft supplies, frantically searching online for ways to have me declared mentally incompetent. She had no idea that her carefully constructed plan was about to collapse in the most spectacular way possible. 48 hours after my one-word response, I was sitting in a coffee shop near Fort Benning when my phone started buzzing like an angry hornet. I had deliberately kept my phone on silent during my debriefing sessions with my commanding officer, but now the screen showed 17 missed calls and 12 unread text messages. 7 calls were from my father, each voicemail more desperate than the last. "Carly, what have you done? Call me back immediately. We need to talk." The panic in his voice was unmistakable, though he was trying to maintain his usual authoritative tone. 4 calls came from Linda, and her messages were pure venom. "You selfish bitch," she hissed in the third voicemail. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? Danny is going to lose his home because of your childish tantrum. Call me back right now, or I swear I'll make you regret this." 2 calls surprised me completely. They were from Danny, my 16-year-old half-brother. His voice was quiet and shaky, completely different from the confident teenager I remembered. "Carly, please call me back. I don't understand what's happening, but Dad is screaming at Linda, and she's talking about calling the police on you. I'm scared. Please just call me back." But the call that made my blood run cold came from a number I didn't recognize. The voicemail was from someone named Patricia Harrison from Harrison Mills and Associates, a law firm in my hometown. "Miss Peterson, this is an urgent matter regarding your family's financial affairs. Your father has requested our assistance with what he claims is an emergency situation involving your military accounts. Please contact our office immediately to discuss resolution of this matter before it escalates further." I sat in that coffee shop for 10 minutes, processing what I was hearing. Then I called my military financial advisor, Captain Rodriguez, who had helped me make the account changes. She answered on the second ring. "Specialist Peterson, I've been expecting your call. I hope you're prepared for what's coming next." "How bad is it?" I asked. "Your father has been more aggressive in his financial activities than we initially realized. Our investigation shows he's borrowed $60,000 from unlicensed lenders, using your trust fund as collateral. Now that the fund is frozen, these people want their money immediately." My hands started shaking. "What kind of unlicensed lenders?" "The kind that don't take no for an answer," Captain Rodriguez said grimly. "We've already been contacted by local police. Your father received some very unfriendly visitors this morning." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another call. This time, the caller ID showed Detective Morrison from the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department. "Miss Peterson? This is Detective Morrison. I need to speak with you about a report filed by Linda Peterson regarding your mental health and alleged threats toward your family." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What kind of threats?" "Mrs. Peterson claims you've been sending threatening messages and that you're suffering from severe PTSD that makes you dangerous to be around. She says you've threatened to hurt family members and that you have access to military weapons. I need to ask you to come in for questioning as soon as possible." I felt the rage building in my chest like a volcanic eruption. Linda wasn't just trying to steal my money. She was trying to destroy my military career and possibly have me arrested or committed. "Detective Morrison, I've been deployed overseas for 18 months. I haven't sent any threatening messages to anyone. I think you need to investigate the source of these claims more carefully." "That's what we intend to do, miss. But I need you to understand that a formal complaint has been filed, and we have to take all threats of violence seriously. When can you come in?" After hanging up with Detective Morrison, I sat in my rental car in the coffee shop parking lot and called Danny back. He answered immediately. "Carly? Thank God. Are you okay? Where are you?" "I'm fine, Danny. But I need you to tell me exactly what's happening at home." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Dad hasn't slept in 2 days. He keeps making phone calls and yelling at people about money. Linda has been on the computer constantly, printing out papers and making phone calls. She told me you've been threatening us and that you're not safe to be around anymore. But Carly, I read some of those text messages she claims you sent, and they don't sound like you at all." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "The writing style is all wrong. You never use words like gonna or in text messages. You always write complete sentences. But these messages Linda showed the police are full of bad grammar and threats that just don't sound like something you'd say. Plus, the timestamps show they were sent while you were supposed to be in meetings with your commanding officer." I realized then that Danny might be my only ally in this nightmare. He was observant, intelligent, and apparently the only family member who actually knew me well enough to spot Linda's deception. "Danny, I need you to do something for me, but it's important that Linda and Dad don't know about it." "Anything, Carly. I know something is really wrong here." I need you to keep track of everything Linda says and does regarding me. Write it down or record it if you can. She's lying about me to the police, and I'm going to need evidence to prove it." "Already on it," Danny said, and I could hear the determination in his voice. I started keeping notes yesterday when she began calling lawyers. "Carly, she's been planning this for weeks." I found papers on her desk about having people declared mentally incompetent. "This isn't about Christmas dinner. She's trying to take control of your money." As I hung up with Danny, I realized that Linda had made one crucial mistake. She had underestimated my little brother's intelligence and loyalty, and she had no idea that I had 5 years of military training in dealing with hostile situations. The war Linda wanted was about to begin, but she was fighting a soldier now, not the confused teenager who had left home 5 years ago. The Jefferson County Sheriff's Department was a modern building with glass walls and polished floors that reflected the fluorescent lights above. I walked through the main entrance wearing my dress uniform, my ribbons and commendations clearly displayed on my chest. Detective Morrison met me in the lobby, a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Specialist Peterson," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming in so quickly. I want to clear this up immediately, Detective. These allegations are completely false." He led me to a small conference room where Captain Rodriguez was already waiting. She had driven down from Fort Benning to provide character testimony and assist with the legal aspects of the case. Detective Morrison opened a thick folder and spread several documents across the table. "Let's start with these text messages your stepmother provided. She claims you sent these threats between December 19th and December 21st. I examined the screenshots Linda had submitted. The messages were supposedly from my phone number, but Danny had been right about the writing style. The grammar was atrocious, full of slang I never used and threats that sounded like they came from a television crime drama. Detective, I was in briefing sessions with my commanding officer during every one of these timestamps. Captain Rodriguez can verify that." Captain Rodriguez pulled out her own folder. "I have Specialist Peterson's complete schedule for the week in question. She was in mandatory debriefing sessions for soldiers returning from deployment. These sessions are recorded, and I have footage showing her in our conference room during the exact times these messages were allegedly sent." Detective Morrison studied the timeline carefully. "That's very helpful. But Mrs. Peterson also claims you've been making threatening phone calls." "I've made exactly 2 phone calls to my family since returning to the United States. One to my half-brother Danny, and one to confirm my travel arrangements. I haven't spoken to Linda or my father at all." "That's interesting," Detective Morrison said, "because Mrs. Peterson also filed a report claiming you've been planning to harm family members due to PTSD-related mental instability. She provided documentation from a doctor, Henley, stating that you're a danger to yourself and others." Captain Rodriguez leaned forward. "Detective, I'd like you to take a look at Specialist Peterson's military psychological evaluations." She handed him a thick folder. "These are conducted every 6 months for deployed personnel. Carly has consistently scored in the excellent range for mental health and stability. She's been recommended for commendation twice for her cool head under pressure." I decided it was time to share what I knew about Linda's real motivations. "Detective Morrison, I believe these false reports are connected to a financial fraud scheme. My stepmother and father have been stealing money from my trust fund for years." His eyebrows rose. "Tell me more about that." I explained the unauthorized withdrawals, the forged signatures, and the recent changes I had made to protect my assets. I also told him about my father's gambling debts and Linda's plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. "Do you have evidence of this financial fraud?" Captain Rodriguez handed him another folder. "Bank records showing irregular withdrawals and forged documents. We've already initiated a federal investigation through Military Financial Crimes Unit." Detective Morrison studied the documents for several minutes, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Finally, he looked up at me with a slight smile. "Specialist Peterson, I think you should know that your stepmother made a significant error when she filed this report." "What kind of error?" "She claimed you made threatening phone calls from your military base phone. But military phone records are automatically logged and recorded. When I requested the records this morning, there were no outgoing calls to your family's number during the time period she specified." I felt a surge of vindication, but Detective Morrison wasn't finished. More importantly, when I ran a background check on Dr. Henley, the psychiatrist who allegedly evaluated you. I discovered some interesting information. He lost his medical license 3 years ago for providing false evaluations in exchange for payment. Mrs. Peterson paid him $5,000 last week for a psychological evaluation of someone he's never actually met. Captain Rodriguez whistled softly. She's been planning this for a while. It gets better, Detective Morrison continued. I also discovered that Mrs. Peterson has been researching guardianship laws and involuntary commitment procedures for the past 2 months. She's been in contact with several lawyers about having you declared mentally incompetent so she could gain control of your finances. The pieces of Linda's conspiracy were falling into place, but I still felt like something was missing. Detective, how did you discover all of this so quickly? He smiled. I had an unusual phone call this morning from your half-brother Danny. He provided some very helpful information about his stepmother's activities. As if summoned by his name, there was a soft knock on the conference room door. A young officer entered and whispered something to Detective Morrison. Specialist Peterson, there's someone here who wants to see you. The door opened wider, and Danny walked in. He was taller than I remembered, with the same dark hair as our father, but our mother's intelligent green eyes. In his hands, he carried a small digital recorder and a folder of papers. Hi, Carly, he said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. I think you need to hear what I recorded last night. He placed the digital recorder on the table and pressed play. Linda's voice filled the room, crystal clear and full of malicious intent. The little military bitch thinks she's so smart, freezing the accounts. But once she's declared incompetent, I'll have control of everything. $400,000 plus her military benefits. Robert is too weak to stop me, and Danny's just a kid. Carly will spend the rest of her life in a psychiatric facility, and I'll finally have what I deserve. The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Detective Morrison turned off the recorder and looked at me with something approaching awe. Miss Peterson, your brother has just provided us with a full confession to conspiracy, fraud, and filing false police reports. Mrs. Peterson is about to have a very bad day. Danny reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry it took me so long to figure out what she was doing, Carly, but I'm on your side now. For the first time in years, I felt like I actually had a family member who cared about me more than money. Linda's plan to destroy me was about to destroy her instead. By noon that same day, Linda's carefully constructed world began collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. Detective Morrison had obtained a warrant to search the family home, and what they found exceeded even my expectations for Linda's deception. In Linda's home office, investigators discovered a folder labeled Carly Problem, containing months of research on involuntary commitment laws, guardianship procedures, and financial power of attorney regulations. She had been corresponding with 3 different law firms about gaining control of my assets, each time presenting a different version of events to see which approach would be most effective. More damning was her computer's internet history, which showed extensive research on forging military psychological evaluations and creating fake text message screenshots. She had even bookmarked a website that sold burner phone numbers that could be used to send untraceable messages. But the most shocking discovery came when police examined her phone records. Linda had been in contact with Tony Marcelli, the loan shark who was pressuring my father for payment. Rather than trying to protect her husband, she had been negotiating a deal to transfer his debts to my trust fund once she gained legal control of my finances. Meanwhile, my father sat in the living room looking like he had aged 10 years in 2 days. When Detective Morrison questioned him, the truth finally came pouring out. I never wanted this to go so far, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda said Carly had more money than she needed, and we were just borrowing against her inheritance. She said military kids expect to support their families. Mr. Peterson, forging your daughter's signature on financial documents is a federal crime. You could face 5 to 10 years in prison. My father's face crumpled. Linda said it was legal because Carly was my daughter, and I was just managing her affairs while she was deployed. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Detective Morrison showed him copies of the forged withdrawal forms. Did you sign your daughter's name on these documents? Yes, but Linda told me what to write. She said she had done research and it was completely legal for parents to access their children's trust funds in emergencies. What kind of emergencies? Gambling debts, mostly. I owe money to some dangerous people, and Linda said using Carly's money was better than losing the house or getting hurt. The interview was interrupted when Detective Morrison's radio crackled with urgent news. Tony Marcelli and 2 of his associates had been arrested attempting to break into our family home. Neighbors had called police when they saw 3 men with baseball bats trying to force their way through the back door. At the police station, Marcelli immediately began cooperating with authorities, revealing that Linda had approached him about transferring my father's gambling debts to a more reliable source of income. She had shown him documents proving I had substantial assets and assured him that she would soon have legal control over my finances. The woman was cold as ice, Marcelli told Detective Morrison. She didn't care what happened to her husband. She just wanted to make sure she got her hands on that trust fund money. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Linda was arrested at her real estate office on charges of fraud, conspiracy, filing false police reports, and witness tampering. The arrest was particularly humiliating because she was in the middle of showing a house to potential buyers when Detective Morrison and 2 uniformed officers arrived with handcuffs. Her mugshot, taken an hour later, showed a woman whose perfect facade had finally cracked. Her makeup was smeared, her hair disheveled, and her eyes held the wild look of someone whose elaborate plans had been completely destroyed. But Linda's arrest was just the beginning of her legal problems. The bank's fraud investigation had uncovered evidence that she had been forging real estate documents for years, using her access to legal forms to create fake property deeds and mortgage documents. The State Real Estate Commission immediately suspended her license pending a full investigation. That evening, I sat in Detective Morrison's office with Danny and Captain Rodriguez, reviewing the charges that would be filed against Linda and my father. The evidence was overwhelming, but I still felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. "What happens to Dad?" I asked. Detective Morrison consulted his notes. "Your father's cooperation will be taken into consideration, but he'll likely face federal charges for the forged signatures. However, his lawyer is negotiating a plea deal that would involve restitution payments and supervised probation rather than prison time." Danny looked exhausted but determined. "What about the house? Where am I supposed to live?" This was the question I had been dreading. Danny was 16 years old, and with Linda facing prison time and my father dealing with criminal charges, his living situation was uncertain. "Danny," I said carefully, "I know this is a terrible time to make big decisions, but I want you to know you have options. When I finish my current military commitment next year, I'll be transitioning to civilian life. If you want to live with me, we can make that happen." His face lit up for the first time in days. "Really? You'd want that?" "Of course. You're my brother, and you're the only family member who stood up for me when it mattered. We'll figure out the details, but you'll always have a place with me." Detective Morrison smiled. "That's good to hear. Now, Miss Peterson, there's one more thing we need to discuss. Mrs. Peterson's defense attorney is already trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wants to make sure you're comfortable with the terms." "What kind of terms?" 2 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution of stolen funds plus penalties. She'll also be required to undergo psychological counseling and will be prohibited from contacting you or Danny. I thought about everything Linda had put me through, all the lies and manipulation and cruelty. 2 years seemed almost too lenient, but I was tired of fighting. As long as she can never hurt Danny again, I can live with that. As we left the police station that evening, Danny walked beside me toward my rental car. The December air was crisp and cold, and Christmas lights twinkled in the gathering darkness. "Carly," he said quietly, "I'm sorry I didn't figure out what Linda was doing sooner. Maybe I could have stopped her before she hurt you so much." I put my arm around his shoulders. "Danny, you're 16 years old. None of this was your responsibility. You did something incredibly brave by recording those conversations and bringing them to the police. You saved both of us." He leaned against me, and I realized that for the first time in years, I felt like I had a real family again. It wasn't the family I had grown up wanting, but it was something much more valuable. A family based on loyalty and love rather than obligation and manipulation. Linda's plan to destroy me had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. But more importantly, it had revealed who my real family was, and that family was worth fighting for. The next few weeks moved like scenes from a legal drama, each development more satisfying than the last. Linda's plea bargain fell through when prosecutors discovered additional evidence of real estate fraud dating back 5 years. Instead of 2 years, she was looking at a potential sentence of 7 to 10 years in federal prison. Her downfall became even more complete when the State Real Estate Commission completed their investigation. Linda had been creating fake property documents and inflating home values to increase her commissions, bilking both buyers and sellers out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. The commission not only revoked her license permanently but also filed additional criminal charges. My father's situation resolved more favorably. His cooperation with authorities and obvious remorse impressed the judge, who sentenced him to 3 years of supervised probation and mandatory attendance at Gamblers Anonymous meetings. More importantly, he was required to make restitution payments of $1,000 per month until the stolen trust fund money was fully repaid. The loan sharks who had been threatening my family were arrested as part of a larger federal investigation into illegal lending operations. Tony Marcelli, facing his own serious charges, continued cooperating with authorities and provided information that led to the shutdown of 3 separate criminal organizations. But the most satisfying moment came when Linda finally pled guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 4 years in federal prison plus 5 years of probation. Standing in the courthouse that February morning, watching her accept responsibility for her crimes, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. During the sentencing hearing, I was allowed to provide a victim impact statement. I had thought carefully about what I wanted to say, and when the judge called my name, I stood up in my dress uniform and spoke directly to Linda. For 5 years, you made me believe I wasn't worthy of love or respect from my own family. You stole my money, you destroyed my relationships, and you tried to have me committed to a psychiatric facility so you could take everything I had worked for. But your biggest mistake was underestimating the bond between Danny and me. You brought us together when you were trying to tear us apart. Linda sat at the defendant's table, her orange jail jumpsuit a stark contrast to the expensive business suits she used to wear. She never looked at me during my statement, but I could see her shoulders shaking with either anger or regret. The judge thanked me for my statement and then delivered Linda's sentence: 4 years in federal prison to be served without possibility of early parole, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. She was also ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution and prohibited from contacting Danny or me for the rest of her life. As the bailiff led Linda away in handcuffs, I felt Danny squeeze my hand. We had won, but more importantly, we had found each other. The legal battles were over, but the real work of rebuilding our lives was just beginning. I used part of my trust fund to help Danny transfer to a private school where he could get the academic support he needed. His grades had suffered during the chaos of Linda's arrest and trial, but with proper tutoring and counseling, he quickly returned to his natural intelligence and curiosity. We also moved him out of the family home and into a small apartment near his new school. Living with our father was no longer healthy for either of us, and Danny needed space to heal from the trauma of Linda's manipulation. My father, to his credit, didn't fight our decision. He was focused on his recovery from gambling addiction and seemed to understand that he had lost the right to make parental decisions through his years of poor choices. I don't blame you for not trusting me, he told me during one of our carefully supervised visits. I failed both of you kids, and I have to live with that. But I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become, Carly. Your mother would be proud too. Those words meant more to me than any apology could have. For the first time since my mother's death, my father seemed to see me as a person rather than a problem or a source of money. The spring brought even more positive changes. I was accepted into a military-to-civilian transition program that would allow me to use my technical skills in the private sector. A defense contractor in Atlanta offered me a position developing security systems, with a salary that would allow Danny and me to live comfortably while he finished high school. But the best surprise came in April, when Detective Morrison called to tell me that the recovered funds from Linda's real estate fraud would be distributed to her victims. As one of the primary victims of her schemes, I would receive an additional settlement of $50,000. Miss Peterson, he said, I've been in law enforcement for 20 years, and I've never seen a case where justice was served so completely. Mrs. Peterson thought she was destroying you, but she ended up giving you everything you needed to build a better life. He was right. Linda's greed and manipulation had inadvertently freed me from a toxic family situation and brought Danny and me closer together. Her attempts to control my finances had led me to take better control of my own assets and plan more carefully for the future. Most importantly, her lies about my mental health had been so thoroughly disproven that my military record was now stronger than ever. The investigation had revealed my true character and competence, leading to commendations that would help me in my civilian career. As Danny and I packed up his belongings that spring, preparing to move to Atlanta together, I found a box of old photos Linda had hidden away. They were pictures of my mother and me, taken during the happy years before her death. Linda had stored them in the basement, probably intending to dispose of them eventually. Danny helped me sort through the photos, and we found several of our mother holding him as a baby. In those pictures, she looked happy and peaceful, surrounded by children who loved her. She would have wanted us to take care of each other, Danny said, holding up a photo of our mother reading to both of us. She did want that, I agreed. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Looking at those photos, I realized that Linda had done more than just try to steal money from me. She had tried to steal my memories and my connection to my mother. But in the end, she had failed at that too. The love between Danny and me, and our shared memories of our mother, were things no amount of manipulation could destroy. As we drove away from the house where we had both experienced so much pain, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine hope for the future. We were finally free to build the kind of family our mother would have wanted us to be. 11 months later, Danny and I were decorating our first Christmas tree together in our new apartment in Atlanta. It was a small tree, nothing fancy, but every ornament had meaning. We hung my mother's vintage glass angels next to handmade decorations Danny had crafted in his art class. The mixture of old and new felt perfect, honoring our past while building something entirely our own. "Remember last Christmas?" Danny asked, adjusting a string of lights. "When you were sitting in that transport vehicle reading Dad's text message?" I smiled, thinking about how different everything had become. I remember feeling like my world was ending. Now I realize it was actually beginning. Danny had thrived in his new school and was already being recruited by several universities for both academics and soccer. More importantly, he was seeing a counselor who helped him process the trauma of living with Linda's manipulation. The angry, confused teenager had transformed into a confident young man with clear goals and healthy relationships. My own transition to civilian life had exceeded all expectations. The defense contractor had promoted me twice, and I was now leading a team developing cybersecurity systems for military applications. The work was challenging and meaningful, combining my military experience with cutting-edge technology. But the most surprising development was the relationship I had built with my father. His recovery from gambling addiction had been genuine and complete. He attended meetings religiously, worked with a sponsor, and had been debt-free for 8 months. More importantly, he had begun the difficult work of understanding how his choices had affected his children. We had dinner together once a month, carefully supervised visits that gradually rebuilt trust between us. He would never be the father I had wanted as a child, but he was becoming a decent man who took responsibility for his mistakes. "I spent so many years trying to fix everything with money," he told me during our November dinner. "I thought if I could just win big enough, I could solve all our problems." But the real problem was that I had forgotten how to be a father. The holidays brought an unexpected surprise. Danny had secretly been in contact with extended family members, our mother's sisters and cousins who had lost touch with us during Linda's reign of manipulation. It turned out that Linda had been telling them that Danny and I didn't want contact with our mother's family, while simultaneously telling us that they had rejected us. On Christmas Eve, Danny opened the apartment door to reveal Aunt Sarah, Cousin Jennifer, and Uncle Mark, all carrying dishes for a surprise dinner. They had driven 3 hours from Macon to spend the evening with us. "We've been trying to reach you kids for years," Aunt Sarah explained as she hugged me tightly. "Linda kept telling us you were too busy with military life to maintain family relationships." We believed her until Danny called last month and told us what really happened. Sitting around our small dining table that evening, sharing stories and memories of my mother, I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood. The warm safety of being surrounded by people who loved me unconditionally. These relatives weren't trying to take anything from me or manipulate me. They simply wanted to be part of our lives. Uncle Mark raised his glass of sparkling cider in a toast. "To your mother, who would be incredibly proud of the family you two have built together." As we clinked glasses, I thought about the text message that had started this entire journey. "Christmas is better without you." At the time, those words had felt like the ultimate rejection. Now I realized they had been a gift in disguise, freeing me from a toxic situation and allowing me to discover what real family actually looked like. After our relatives left that evening, Danny and I sat on the couch looking at our Christmas tree. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle hum of holiday music playing softly in the background. "You know what's funny?" Danny said. "Linda was right about one thing. Christmas is better without her." I laughed, recognizing the truth in his observation. Christmas is better without anyone who treats family like disposable resources. As midnight approached, marking the official start of Christmas Day, I reflected on everything I had learned over the past year. The most important lesson wasn't about financial security or legal justice, though both had been necessary. The real lesson was about the difference between biological family and chosen family. Biological family is an accident of birth, but chosen family is created through love, loyalty, and mutual respect. Danny and I had chosen each other, along with the extended relatives who had welcomed us back into their lives. My father was earning his way back into our chosen family through consistent effort and genuine change. Linda, despite sharing a household with us for years, had never been family at all. She had been a predator masquerading as a caregiver, and recognizing that truth had set us free to build something better. The military had taught me that the strongest units aren't created through random assignment but through soldiers choosing to trust and protect each other. The same principle applied to family. The people who truly loved me had proven it through their actions when I needed them most. As Danny fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the excitement of our first real Christmas together, I covered him with a blanket and thought about the future. In 6 months, he would graduate from high school and head to college on a full scholarship. I would continue building my career while maintaining the support system we had created together. We had learned that real strength comes from knowing your worth and refusing to accept mistreatment, even from people who claim to love you. We had discovered that sometimes the most loving response to family toxicity is protecting yourself and those you care about most. And we had proven that chosen family often provides the acceptance and understanding that biological family cannot. Linda's plan to destroy me had instead taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that love isn't about obligation or blood relations, but about people who choose to stand by you when everything falls apart. Danny had chosen to record those conversations and bring them to the police. Our extended family had chosen to drive 3 hours to spend Christmas Eve with us. My father was choosing to do the hard work of recovery and redemption. And I had chosen to fight back instead of accepting the role of victim that Linda had planned for me. As I turned off the Christmas tree lights and headed to bed, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. The scared, lonely soldier who had received that brutal text message 11 months ago had become a confident woman surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her welfare. Christmas really was better now, not because anyone was excluded, but because only people who knew how to love were included. The single word I had texted back to my father, "understood," had been more prophetic than I realized. I finally did understand what family was supposed to be, and I had found the courage to build it for myself. Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to protect yourself from family members who were hurting you? How did you find the strength to set boundaries with people you loved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember that your story might help someone else who's going through a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment from the people in their lives. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that you always have the power to choose who gets to be part of your life. Here's to building families based on love, respect, and genuine care for each other. Merry Christmas, and may your holidays be filled with people who truly know how to love you.